إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح الأمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده وتركنا على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك فمن يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعص الله ورسوله فلا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثتها وكل محدثة بدع وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد. My respected brothers, around the middle of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mission as the messenger to convey the message from none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he comes across a juncture in his life which he calls the most difficult time in his life. And at that moment, Aisha radiallahu anha, rather later on, Aisha radiallahu anha has a conversation with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with her beloved, offering us a window to the struggle, the prophetic struggle that none other than our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced. When she asks a question to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she says, was that the most difficult moment in your life in Uhud, Battle of Uhud? And of course, Battle of Uhud took place few years after the migration from Mecca to Medina took place. And Aisha radiallahu anha, the mother of the believers, was far too young to know or to remember what may have happened in the early part of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's messengership. To that, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replies, no. The most difficult moment in my life, the most difficult time that I've experienced in my life was that day in Ta'if. And that happened at a time called the Amul Huzn, the year of sorrow. And it was called the year of sorrow because in that particular year, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lost several people in his lives. He lost the love of his life, Khadija radiallahu anha, the support, the person who would support unwaveringly the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his mission. One of the first people who believed in him, trusted in him. She died. Then shortly after, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncle Abu Talib dies. And with the passing away of his uncle, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam now loses the support outside the house. And of course, everyone around him is turning against him. And he's driven out at that moment. His followers are killed as well. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's face persecution. And nobody can imagine, subhanallah, the difficulty that one may face that would drive them ultimately away from their homeland. It's a very difficult scenario, very difficult situation. It's a very difficult experience. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never put us through any such experience, Ya Rabb. And at that moment, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam decides to travel to a faraway land by foot, which would take him a considerable amount of time to Ta'if. And of course, we all know the harsh treatment that Prophet ﷺ received there. He was pelted at, he was stoned, Prophet ﷺ was bloodied, and it It's enough a rejection when people don't accept your message, but it's even more embarrassing and degrading when people treat you in a manner like that. It's one thing when you're told in your face, we don't want to believe you, we have had enough of you, leave us. But that wasn't the case with the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was treated the way he was treated. So much so that as he would walk, his blood, which is pouring down his head, his body, would reach his feet, dry up, and now his sandal is sticking to his feet. Can you imagine? Can you imagine Prophet ﷺ in front of you, blood gushing out? You wouldn't be able to imagine that about your own parents. You wouldn't be able to imagine that about your own neighbors, about your own friends, about your own foe, let alone the Prophet ﷺ, who has conveyed this message to us and because of whom we are a Muslim, we are stood here, we are sat here. And at that moment, Prophet ﷺ, he describes that moment to be the lowest point in his life. And subhanAllah, as I was contemplating on this particular moment, Prophet ﷺ makes a heartfelt, profound dua. What suddenly became clear to me is something that everyone can relate. It's part of life that people you love passes away. Calamity strikes you. And those definitely would be some of those lowest points in your life. But what Prophet ﷺ is describing to be the lowest point in his life is the fact that he was let down by people. Despite having lost the love of his life, the protection from his uncle, he is saying that the lowest point in my life is when I was let down by people. And this is something every single one of us here, including myself, can relate to. You have been let down by people who you have entrusted, you have submitted your trust in them, and they have let you down. They have let you down in a manner that just makes you want to trust nobody else after that. So it left the Prophet ﷺ feel very lonely, grieved. He has come all the way from miles, Mecca, to seek some support from this township. And they are turning him away. Where does he go? He cannot go back to Mecca anymore. He doesn't know any other place. And subhanAllah, that, as if that was the last straw in the Prophet ﷺ's life. He thought during that moment that if I had not received support and assistance from these people in Ta'if, that Islam would crumble, Islam would not proliferate, Islam would not prevail. Right? And so he makes this profound dua at that moment. A dua that originates from the depth of his heart. A dua at a point of loneliness, desperation. A dua that he makes at a point in time when he was at his weakest. He says, Allahumma ilayka ashku du'fa quwwati wa qillata hilati wa hawani ala nas. Prophet ﷺ says, Oh Allah, I complain to you. I come to you with a complaint. And I complain to you about my weakness. I complain to you about my lack of means. And I complain to you about the way I'm treated by people, how they see me as insignificant. They don't value me. There's no honor for me. There's no sort of honor and respect from people towards me. And these are the words of the Prophet, a Prophet of Allah. Can you imagine a Prophet breaking down to that level? And if a Prophet is speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a manner, what does that tell us about our own state? How much of a need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are we in? If this is how Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being the most noble of characters and mankind, the leader of mankind, breaks down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When your back is against the wall, when your heart is constricted, There's only one thing that you desperately need, and that's comfort. And you know, of course, people, your friends, your neighbors, your family, they can come and say things and do things that will perhaps grant you some level of comfort. But it's all temporary. Because you know those people are incapable of changing the tide, changing the situation. And so when your back is against the wall, it makes you realize that the only person, only being that you can turn to wholeheartedly is none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through this dua, and isn't it amazing that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was alone making that dua, alone, and yet that dua has reached us. Alone, but that dua has reached us. Nobody has heard, but still that dua is saved and protected and saved for us. Because we all will find ourselves in those situations when we are all by ourselves. And we will all be required to raise our hand and submit ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with these very same words. And the beautiful thing is, of course the dua carries on, that shortly after this dua is made by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the tide changes. Now Islam is on the rise. Now the Muslims are winning battles. Now the Muslims have migrated to Medina. Now Islam is proliferating and prevailing and traversing and spreading across lands. Now Islam suddenly becomes a power to be reckoned with. Shortly after this dua. And when a prophet turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala complaining, they're not exactly complaining. Behind the complaint is hope. A dua is nothing but hope. And that's why Ayyub alayhi salam, he tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inni massani ad-dur, that harm has afflicted me. And he doesn't say much beyond that. Wa anta arhamur rahimin, you're the most merciful. Meaning I have hope in you. Regardless of whatever situation I find myself in, I have not lost hope. You're the most merciful one. And that's why Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he loses his son, Yaqub alayhi salam, when he loses his son, Yusuf alayhi salam, right, he complains to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Innama ashku bathi wa huzni ila Allah. That I know nobody can do anything here. I submit my affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I complain to Him. And he did not complain only. He showed how hopeful he was because he carried on crying. Somebody who gives up on their son or somebody who gives up on a resolution coming forth does not cry for that long. He kept his hopes high. He kept his hope. And of course we see in the dua of Zakaria alayhi salam, when he breaks down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that I have reached 100. My bones are feeble, right? I still want a son. Hope. What's the point of calling somebody if you are not calling him with hope, mercy? And that's exactly why the dua carries on. Prophet ﷺ says, Anta arhamur rahimin. You're the most merciful of merciful ones. He says that twice, as if to say that this is exactly what I need, rahmah, at this moment. Because without your rahmah, I wouldn't have comfort. Anta rabbul mustada'afin, anta rabbi. He says, you are my Lord, and you're the Lord of all those people who are weak. But before Prophet ﷺ says, you're my Lord, he says, you're the Lord of everyone who's weak. That shows the sensitive and the caring nature of a prophet who, before he puts himself forward, he says, you're the Rabb of mustad'afin. Just like I'm in need of you, all those people who are troubled, they're in need of you. And then Prophet ﷺ carries on saying, Allahumma ila man takiluni. Who have you left me with? Who are you going to leave me with? Ila ba'idin yatajahhamuni. All these people, distant people, who are turning against me. Am ila adubin mallaktahu amri. Or are you going to leave me with people who are who have shown animosity towards me, i.e. his own tribe. I.e., don't leave me with anybody that I cannot trust. You're the only person who can help me. And through these wordings, Prophet ﷺ is teaching us something. That whenever we make dua, we ought to have this attitude, maintain this attitude and this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That no matter what happens, at the lowest of our life, in fact, if I may rephrase my word, when somebody reaches the lowest point in their life, that reveals their character and their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because at that moment, you realize you cannot depend on anybody. At the lowest point, you realize nobody can help you. Yes, people may be able to help you with money and support, but you know that feeling that you have, nobody can take that away. And that feeling can only be changed and transformed by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Prophet ﷺ goes on and makes this profound dua by entrusting his affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the next portion of the dua is something that really, really shakes me. Prophet ﷺ says that إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ بِكَ غَضَبٌ عَلَيَّ فَلَا أُبَالِي غَيْرَ أَنَّ عَافِيَتَكَ أَوْسَعُ لِي. He says, what matters most to me is that you're not upset with me. Everything I can face, as long as I know that you are content. I am weak in this mission. Perhaps I have failed this mission. Perhaps I will fail this mission. I don't know if I can carry on any longer. But what matters to me is whether you accept me. What matters to me is how you see me. What matters to me is what you think of me. Because I know success in this mission would not happen without you anyway. I am weak to start off with. This is a prophet speaking. If a prophet, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, right, Ashraful Anbiya, the most noble of humankind and messengers, say that they are weak, of course we are even more weaker. Right? If they are breaking down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how should our state be? But at that moment, he reminds us that in our effort to build a masjid, to build a community, to do all sorts of good, perhaps we might fail. And most often we fail. Sometimes we fail grandly. But it's whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts us or not, how our relationship would be during that mission. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to accept us, then everything that we do is in vain. Then Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, although it's all getting very difficult, I seek your blessings and protection. That would be easier for me. And then Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I seek refuge in the light of your face, in your countenance, by which all darkness is illuminated. And when bad things are happening to you in your life, it's all dark and gloomy, sorrow, misery, desolation, dejection, rejection. Everything is dark and gloom. Prophet ﷺ is saying, everything can be lifted, all the darkness, by the light of your countenance, when you radiate your light upon it. And I seek refuge from you from only one thing, that your wrath does not descend upon me, that your anger does not afflict me. And then Prophet ﷺ submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I want you to divert your attention to one last thing before I finish, because my time is run out. The ending of this dua is very powerful. When Prophet ﷺ says that as long as your wrath does not descend on me, and your anger does not afflict me, and as long as you accept me, as long as my relationship with you is intact, I can do anything. At a very weak point in his life, Prophet ﷺ makes this profound dua. And the ending of the dua shows that this submission is what suddenly turns the Prophet ﷺ into a brave and courageous person once again. Right? He says this in the most truest moment of desperation, when he finds himself alone. He affirms Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's oneness. He affirms his full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He affirms his own weakness in every matter in this divine mission. He affirms that all that matters to him is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's acceptance. And that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be strong once again, as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to provide him with comfort, solace, and support. Barakallahu lana fil Qur'anil Azim wa nafa'na bil ayati wa dhikril hakim. Ya Rabbal Alamin. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم يا كاشف الكروبات ويا سامع الأصوات ويا موجب الدعاة، نسألك أن تعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أصلح أحوال المسلمين في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر دينك وكتابك وسنة نبيك يا رب العالمين. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. وأقيموا الصلاة.